The University of Louisville empowers students with over 50 fully online degrees and certificates in areas like business, public health, social work, engineering, and more. Flexible coursework allows time to focus on all of life's priorities. Learn more at louisville.edu/online.
From the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning,
and the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning,
I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I am Tom Cavanaugh.
And you are listening to Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kelvin. I am also listening to the Teaching Online podcast.
Me too.
Yeah.
Can you listen and talk at the same time? I mean,
I think so. Yeah, it's very meta, but I think it can be done.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they say that you shouldn't just be, listening with an ear toward what you're going to say next, but you should be, listening.
Active listening. Yeah, that's nice of you to say. But what I really want to say, Kelvin.
I hear you saying active listening. What do you mean by that, Tom?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This will be the last podcast anybody listens to if whoever actually did that. Well, Kelvin, you may have noticed me sipping my UCF mug. I've got some coffee going here, and I imagine you have some coffee going there.
Yeah. What's in your cup?
So in my cup is kind of my go-to. I'm working from home today, so it's San Francisco Bay, kind of just a straight-up regular roast, and it's good. I like it. Yeah, maybe quasi-thematically selective.
I will look forward to you circling back around and closing that loop in a moment.
Okay.
I'm looking for. Well, my coffee today, Tom, is a single origin Rwanda, framed with all kinds of creativity as a special release for Juneteenth 2024 by Atlanta-based roaster Portrait Coffee. The coffee roasters collaborated with a multidisciplinary artist known as The Color to create this particular coffee profile and the custom imaginative artwork on the bag's label. And they call this single origin Funkonia. And they offer a further creative tasting note. A lot of tasting notes are kind of pretentious, This one, they say, imagine a blue raspberry Jolly Rancher. I'm going to tell you, it does not taste like a blue raspberry Jolly Rancher to me, but I guess they didn't really say that it would. They just said, imagine one.
Imagine one, yeah. It doesn't seem like your speed either, a blue raspberry coffee. Yeah.
Right. Not too much. But the coffee is pretty tasty. I wonder if you can find a connection to today's topic in my cup, and I'm still pondering yours.
Well, maybe. Man, it was a funky bit of art you just held up. It looked almost like, Beatles, Yellow Submarine kind of psychedelic going on there.
Fanciful. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm going to go with the theme of innovation because there's a lot going on in there. There's a bit of a mashup. You got, what was it? The Color is the name of the artist. Then Funkonia and Raspberry Jolly Rancher. I mean, it's a mashup, man. So I'm going to say, innovation, which kind of ties to what we're talking about today, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. Creative, innovative, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if that's kind of where you were going with your San Francisco fog chaser is kind of Silicon Valley and stuff. I didn't know.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So it's more kind of on the entrepreneurial side of things, as well as some innovation. But, the Bay Area is sort of known for being the home of startups and entrepreneurs, and it's where people go to make their dreams come true and make a difference in the world. And I thought, well, there's a little bit of a San Francisco connection. I had a coffee that had that in it.
I got you. I got you. Well, maybe we should say that, yeah, we've probably put more time into this episode than we usually do because we talked about it once or twice.
Yeah, it's not the typical, let's just wing it, right?
Here's an email. What do you think about talking about this? Oh, that sounds good. We actually talked about it once or twice. And I would call this topic challenging a little bit because just we were working on circling the runway a bit, just even kind of defining the topic. We started off planning to talk about, quote, the importance of professional development for yourself and those around you, unquote. But as we talked about what we meant, we knew we were talking about something more than, for instance, the way we addressed a related topic back in episode number 133, which was professional development across our online education community. And we knew that it was related to, but beyond, episode number 148 with guest Jared Stein, Fostering Digital Learning Innovation. And you started talking more. What did you start
Well,
referring to it as?
I was working at the time on a chapter in a book that I'm co-writing and co-editing with Jocelyn Widmer. And I happened, when we were talking about this, to be writing a chapter kind of on entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial mindset. So I really kind of had that on my mind. And that was sort of my catalyst for kind of suggesting today's topic. But you kind of did a yes and to that.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, I hear you're entrepreneurial, but it seems like it's also growth-oriented, purpose-driven, some kind of a creative dynamic in ourselves and our teams, kind of. I think sometimes you could just say entrepreneurship and you just think of like a business model or something and not necessarily that creative impulse.
Yeah. So whatever we call it, we think it's a force for good, both personally and kind of within our organizations. I think oftentimes the kinds of organizations that you and I work in are hubs of different kinds of thinking and innovation and bringing new creative ideas to bear that maybe other departments don't feel that responsibility to think really outside the box and to solve problems in different ways. And I think that it's almost a job requirement in the digital learning space to have this, what I've called like a startup mindset. And it kind of goes to that Silicon Valley idea where be nimble, be agile, try some stuff, fail fast, and pilot and just think differently about it.
Yeah, I mean, and just maybe just to put an even finer point on it, I guess, at the individual level, there's something fulfilling that comes when you tap into all of that. And I think you're engaged. I'm reminded of, I think it's related to Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow state, all of that. And that then connects the personal and the organizational through things like engagement and retention and so forth. But at the organizational level, a collective commitment to innovation and change, I think, is necessary because, to your point, if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting.
Yeah. What isn't that the classic definition of insanity, right? Keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Or higher education, whichever.
Or, hey, yeah, tomato, right? Yeah, so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today, this idea that in digital learning areas in particular, it's not just good, but in some ways maybe even necessary that we be the vanguards of this kind of thinking, this kind of attitude. And something that I've been made aware of, relatively recently, within the last 6-8 months, something like that, is this concept of futures literacy. A friend of the podcast, Dr. Christy Ford, shared it with me, and it's an article in Medium that she shared by Nicholas Larson. and we can link to it if anybody wants to read it further. But it kind of talks to the idea of not being constrained to the way things always have been, and being literate in the ways of thinking about possibility, so that you can think about ways of doing things, accomplishing things, solving problems based on maybe a different set of assumptions, maybe a different frame of reference, and to just kind of get out of the kind of iterative thinking and just maybe think a little bit differently. And it's actually really hard to train yourself to not be kind of bound by your own personal frames of reference, but to be futures literate is to kind of see possibility. And I really like that idea.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. We talked a little bit about possible futures and so forth in the kickoff episode for our current season 10, and I think we maybe touched on a little bit of that theme a little as well. Do you want to you mentioned this book chapter you're working on. Do you want to pull anything from that you think is applicable to everybody?
Sure. I mean, maybe just a couple of quick highlights. I kind of started off with a quote that I think I stole from you, because I think I've seen it on an email signature or two of yours, but it's from Alan Kay. And the best way to predict the future is to invent it. I love that. That's futures literate. That's not being constrained by the ways of the past in order to kind of imagine a possible future. It's no secret that we are in an environment, especially in the digital learning space, that is continually, rapidly changing. Every time you turn around, there's new technology, new practice, new challenges, and then just throw AI on top of all of that. And that feels like it's got a completely new advancement every 2 months or something. It's like, it's just really hard to keep up. And so within that kind of an environment, you have to be agile. You have to be willing to try some stuff and to fail and to maybe pilot and iterate. And that's what I kind of meant by the startup mentality, having this mission focus, being passionate, not being deterred by obstacles, because they will come up. If you think about your typical startup founder, entrepreneur, there's so many obstacles that are amassed against their success, from fundraising to operational challenges to trying to scale to maybe regulations and licensing and just technology and hiring people. I mean, everything is managing a board, like all of the stuff that a startup founder does. And you could kind of say that in many ways, we're kind of intrapreneurs because we live within an organization, but we have a lot of these same mandates. Solve this problem, this new problem, here's extra work. And oh, by the way, you're not getting extra money funding to do it. It requires you to think creatively like a startup, like somebody who's being nimble and trying to, work within a system. And then maybe the last thing I'll highlight is this idea of being open to good ideas no matter where they come from. And I think that's something we're pretty good at here at UCF. We try to listen to everybody, especially our student workers. They're a great source of ideas. Because they often bring the things that they're challenged with. And I was kind of inspired also by this quote by Linus Pauling. I think if he's not the only guy, he might be the only guy, if not, there's not many, that has 2 Nobel Prizes. He's a very impressive dude. But he had this quote that was, the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. And I really like that.
No, that's really good. I was thinking as you're talking about another element that we had a kickoff to the academic year, sort of pre-fall last year. Speaking of entrepreneurial, with a internal faculty member who led a workshop for the provost leadership team here, and Dr. Ryan Quinn, who heads up the Center for Positive Leadership out of U of L's College of Business.
I love the name.
I know, it's great, right? I haven't engaged a lot with him or his center yet, but out of a day-long workshop, one of the things that just wouldn't leave me alone is his juxtaposition of problem-centered or problem-driven approaches, problem-solving, and purpose-driven approaches. And I remember writing myself little notes, and I just kind of kept chewing on that. And I think, I don't know, I'm not, the risk of speaking for him, I'm not trying to speak for him, I'm just like, this is where my head went as a result of that. Often we can kind of work within a box. We think we have everything defined, and you're kind of working the problem with the assumptions that somebody hands you, versus I think more of this creative impulse, this creative urge. There's something about purpose and drive and seeing the horizon and trying to go somewhere and push a boundary and not being as constrained, I think. So, I don't know that those things are in direct opposition necessarily. We you don't just sit here and stare at a blank wall every day and go, I'm going to create, right? You usually have something stimulates that creative urge, like you got a problem to solve, so to speak. But I wonder about that a little bit. When this entrepreneurial spirit, this self-actualizing, this empowering, I think it comes from something closer to purpose than it does problem. But what do you think?
I tend to be kind of motivated by solving problems. So that's personally my intrinsic motivation. And maybe it varies from person to person. I could definitely see someone kind of being more purpose-driven than problem-driven. But I think in either case, you kind of end up at the same place. And to your point, I think it's really important that this doesn't just reside in the leader of the organization, that this kind of attitude, this mindset, this kind of spirit of being open to possibility, of being entrepreneurial, of maybe being proactive and owning some stuff, having a bunch of ideas, even if maybe they're not all amazing, that's adopted and embraced by everybody on the team, from the highest executive to the groundskeeper and janitor, right? Because everybody has the potential to provide a really good idea. And you want to create an environment where people feel safe sharing an idea, that they're not going to be shut down or told that's dumb or something. Or if we try something and it fails, that there's some sort of like horrible consequence for them, because that's the worst thing you can do to incent others to adopt this kind of a mindset. So you kind of have to create this environment where it's safe and you don't maybe extend too far, so that if you fail, the ramifications of that aren't going to be drastic and deadly to an organization. But create an environment where you encourage people and reward them for taking a chance.
Yeah. I think that's good. I can't help but quip. I don't know if I ever shared this with you. My last principal that I worked for when I was in the K-12 system, who shall remain nameless, but was a former art educator, and I was a former music educator. And so we really kind of gelled real well. And she was very innovative, and we used, phrases like break the mold and all that. But after I left there, I said about her once to somebody something that stuck with me, because I think it's true. I'm like, she was really an out-of-the-box thinker, and she wanted everybody to be an out-of-the-box thinker, as long as it wasn't her box.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of to your point, right, of the leader, like, okay, I'm the one having the, I need you to stay in my box. No. You want to cultivate everybody kind of pushing the bounds a bit.
Yeah, but that also assumes that there are still people who understand the box, right? Because sometimes there's a box that you do have to stay in, whether it's legal or regulatory or compliance or technical or something, right? You can't be so far out there, so many standard deviations off the mean that it's just not possible, right? And so finding that balance, that's the other side of things, but that's not the fun part. The fun part is doing that ideation and trying to figure something out and then say, okay, well, what do we have to overcome? That's what I kind of think about this startup mindset, where these startup founders have all of these obstacles they have to overcome, but they don't start by saying, all right, what are the obstacles? It's the other way around.
That's right. That's right. And the envisioning. I was thinking, we've touched on this, I think, in the past on the podcast. You have there at UCF something that I think is a practical laboratory for fostering some of what we're talking about. And you call that Hack Days, comes out of a kind of a developer mindset. And when I came here, I wasn't seeking to necessarily just steal and copy everything. But when I had some conversations that led me to believe that there were folks comfortable in their boxes a little bit, and to some extent, and there was some interest in how do we help people grow and learn and have professional development and all. I thought maybe we can learn a lesson or two from the UCF approach, and so we consulted, with some of your team to form our own thing that we now call Learning and Innovation Days, or Learnovate Days. But I wonder if we might...
You do love a portmanteau.
I do love a portmanteau. I do. Yeah. I wonder if we might share a little bit about what those things, those two entities have in common and what their differences are, that help foster that kind of mindset and culture that we've been talking about.
Sure. Maybe I can just, for those who maybe haven't heard us talk about Hack Day before, I can give 30 seconds on what that is. In fact, today was our Hack Day showcase as we were recording this.
Isn't that interesting?
For the summer. Yeah, so we do it 3 times a year, and we give the staff 24 hours to work on basically whatever project they want. It's not required. You don't have to participate, but a lot of people do. And as you said, it kind of grew out of the application development programmer culture, which is why it's called Hack Day. But it's not limited to those kinds of projects. It can be absolutely anything. And then we vote on them, right? And then there's little prizes and 3D printed medals and things that people get. And we award that for the top 3. We've been doing this for a long time now, many years. And in almost every case, there's a majority of the projects that people work on, we just instantly implement, or with some minor modifications, we implement. In some cases, people try something and it's a colossal failure. It's like, this didn't work at all. But here's what I learned. And that is just as valuable as having something you can implement. Because people, they teach themselves some new process, some new code. They try something really weird. The example I always give is from a few years ago. The Tech Ranger team which is our kind of student programmers, had a fish tank in their office, and they had a goldfish in it, and they pointed a camera at the goldfish, and they wrote some tracking software that, as the fish swam around, coded actual program. And so it wrote programs that did things because of its movement swimming around. It was so weird, and there was no practical application for it, but I loved it because they tried something, and I bet they all learned something really interesting that they ended up applying on some project later that they would not have learned hadn't we tried this. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that's a programming one, but we've had people write document guides, like style guides, as part of it because they never had a chance to get to it. The admin team came in second one time because they used a Hack Day to clean up the office supply closet, and everybody loved that. That was great. So it could be anything, right? But it's about generating ideas and giving them the space to work on it.
Yeah, no, those are all great. And I guess we should, we'll link some stuff that we've probably linked before. It was a developer, Ian Turgeon, back in the day, who I think pitched this idea to you, and it comes out of, the tech industry. There are things like it in tech companies and so forth, and
It was actually
adapted
pitched
it
by
there.
HR, our OD and training person. It was Atlassian's FedEx Days. And so you can look that up. That was kind of the inspiration. So FedEx Day means that you have to deliver a product after 24 hours. But Ian embraced it, ran it, and made it his own, and kind of put his own and UCF spin on it. So I give him 100% credit.
Yeah. So coming here, like when I started seeing, I think we might need to do something somewhat like that. And yet we didn't have a big developer emphasized culture like you do there in the Division of Digital Learning. So as I was pitching this to like a kind of an ad hoc planning team, I said, at its core, this thing that we're going to pursue is about the proactive impulse to create and the connection between that impulse and one's sense of purpose and passion, as opposed to reactively being bound by what is.
Yeah.
And then, we had to operationalize. This is, the culture here is one of documentation and consistency, steadiness, and understanding the boundaries and all. So there was much more of a deliberative planning process. We kind of talked some things through. We read some things that people had written from UCF. We met with some of your team members and kind of had our team members asking questions. We did a pilot. We debriefed with some of your folks and so forth. Much more of a, okay, now let's evaluate it when it's done and all that. But for instance, here's a goal statement. It's like, you know how they say you shouldn't have double-barreled questions? This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is like an 8-barreled goal statement. Each semester, each team member will have the option to take one whole workday to pursue a passion project of one's own choice, have a learning experience, innovate, which we kind of operationally define as new and better in some existing practice, create something that hasn't existed before, carry out a personal sense of purpose, collaborate with others, identify an area of growth, energy, and or exploration, try something new and uncomfortable in a safe and supportive environment. And so part of the evaluation is we ask people whether they got, which of those things they got to do. And overwhelmingly, the first couple, pursue a passion project, have a learning experience. But, somebody answered yes to all of those things.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's very Hack Day spirity. Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So we're in our, weirdly enough, we didn't talk about this beforehand. We had Learnovate Days this week. It's a 1-week window. I stole that idea from the COVID era adaptation of Hack Days at UCF. And it was just going to be easier to make it work within a 1-week window than just to have one day. So, it's work. So today ended the 1-week window. So weirdly enough, you had your showcase, we had our end of the window. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, funny coincidence. But I mean, that is a way to foster an entrepreneurial spirit within the staff. It doesn't cost anything. All you have to do is give them some time. In our case, we give them one day 3 times a year, summer, fall, and spring. And they love it. And I love it because it often results in really, really good ideas and stuff that we can use. But if nothing else, it pays dividends later. Like I said, they'll learn something, and it's not terrible for staff retention because they're being given these opportunities to try stuff that's fun. They get to partner up or try something new or learn something new or just do something really weird, like have a fish program something. It's cool. And I just don't see any downside to it.
No, I imagine that there are some people who are particularly risk averse who are like, I don't know. Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah. Well, as you may recall, it kind of spread across campus. And we had folks from central marketing and from IT and a couple of other places that would join us. I think it's still mostly us, but it's open to the whole campus now.
Which I think is great. Maybe we'll throw some things in the show notes that I have found inspiration from, like Ian Turgeon that we mentioned. Ian turned me onto a podcast way back. It's kind of defunct, but you can still find the archived podcast now. Mega Maker. There's this pilot episode is Life is Better When You Make Stuff. And this guy was just on who hosted was just on a serial entrepreneurial kick. He kept challenging himself to just make something. He'd do a little startup business or a little I'm gonna produce a t-shirt and I'm gonna, sell 500 of them or what, and he would just do this kind of stuff. And the podcast is his way of kind of unpacking that. And there's a lot of inspiration in there. And I think about also the podcast Hidden Brain. They did a wonderful episode a couple of years ago that I've recommended to people for a while, Cultivating Your Purpose. I think it's related as well, but it taps into something that resonates with everything that we've been talking about, right? Get you get you in motion.
Absolutely. So do you think maybe I should try to land the plane here?
Unless you want to take it apart and build something else midair, I guess.
Yeah, well, that would be thinking outside the box, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm almost out of coffee, and that's usually my sign that we've been talking long enough. All right, so Kelvin, no matter what your role is, everyone in digital learning needs to develop an entrepreneurial mindset. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep on getting what we've been getting. In many ways, higher education is looking to us in the digital learning space to come up with the new innovations to make things better. I certainly take that responsibility seriously and feel it.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. I think that's accurate. And that kind of inspiration and aspiration keeps me coming back every day.
That's right. That's what makes it fun.
That's right. Well, thanks for the inspirational and energizing conversation. As always, enjoyed that. And I guess I'll say until next time for Topcast, I'm Kelvin.
And I'm Tom.
See ya.